Basics. I'm Lauren Tancini from Stonebranch, and I will be your moderator today. Before we begin, I'd like to cover a few things. This event is designed to be interactive between you and the speakers. If you have any questions, click on the Q&A tab in the dashboard and submit your questions, and we will answer them at the end of the session. In the event we don't have time to answer your question, we will follow up with you afterwards. Additionally, in the right-hand corner of your screen, you will find some handouts that are related to today's session. With all that said, it's my pleasure to announce the Stonebranch speakers in today's session. First, we have Bob Lemieux, Vice President of Global Presales, Huseyin Gomleksizoglu, Lead Solutions Engineer in the United States, and Karthik Mohan, who is a Solutions Engineer. All right, let's pass it over to Karthik. Karthik, take it away.
Thank you, Lauren. So, hello everyone. Myself, Karthik Mohan. I am a solution engineer here at Stonebranch. I take care of the pre-sales related activities, and I am based out of Frankfurt. Today, we are going to show you some tips and tricks with respect to Universal Automation Center. And these are the topics which we would like to cover today during today's webinar. Yeah. So let me get started with my topics. So the first and foremost topic which we have in place is how to set up the system preferences within the Universal Automation Center user interface. So let me quickly switch my screen to the controller interface. Yeah. So I hope everyone can see my screen. So within the Universal Controller, every administrator can set up the system preferences, which would help you to control the system properties and the performance metrics. So you can access it from the services menu. Yeah, and under services menu, under administration, you have the options for the called properties. You can favorite it, and then you can access it also from your left panel. So these set of properties define how the system behaves. Yeah. So for example, you can set up the administrator emails from here, the default email ID, and you can also set up the agent catch retention period. So by default, it's set to 7, but you can change it according to your preferences and stuff. For example, if you want to search for a particular properties, since it is a huge list of system properties available for you to set up, you can also use the search bar at the top, which would help you to search for all the system properties available. For example, if you want to set up the log retention period, you can search for it and then you can change the values and such. And for example, you can also try to define the bulk export path. So here this is set to a default path, and if you want it to be some other path in your controller node, you can also set it to there. Yeah. So in terms of high availability setups, once you change these definitions in one of the controllers, this will automatically be reflected in the second cluster node of the controller because we share a common database when set up in high availability cluster setups and things. Yeah. And the next topic which I have for today is the server operations on the universal controller. The server operations, just like the system properties, will help you to administrate and maintain the health of the Universal Automation Center. You can access it from the left panel once you favorite it, or again also from the services menu. So I will be accessing it from here. So here you can choose wide variety of system operations, which helps you the administration of the Universal Controller. For example, you can perform a bulk export from here. You can clear the server cache, in this case the controller cache. Yes, and then it will show you the status of the server operation which is completed. And if you want, you can also choose to download the logs from here itself. In this case, you can run the server operation, which will provide you with a list of logs available at this cluster node. In this case, the controller logs. And if I want it, I can choose to download all of these logs or any one of the logs using here. And then I can use it for log inspection or something like that. Yeah. So once it is downloaded, you can make it available for log inspection. Now going back to my slides. So the next topic which I have here is like customizing the user themes. So this is user preference settings, not a system properties or system-wide settings. It's for every user. They can individually choose their user themes here. For this, everyone can go to their user profile, and here we can see preferences. And if we go down, you have the option to choose between system default, light, and dark. For example, if I switch it to dark mode, you will see the dark mode theme being applied to the universal controller. So this is a user-specific setting which each and every user can choose to have it in the universal controller interface. Yeah. Now it is in the dark mode. Next thing I would like to see is like these are the user interface settings and preferences each and every user and administrator can have. And now I would like to showcase a workflow which would demonstrate how you can run jobs within a Kubernetes environment from our universal controller and things. Let me switch back to the controller and let me open the workflow which I have for today's demo. So this is the workflow which I have. So here, what we are trying to do is we are having an integration for managing Kubernetes environments. In this case, we can also launch a pod with Universal Agent installed in it while launching the pod. And once it is available, we can monitor the status of the Kubernetes pod, whether it is running or not only the pod and also the containers within the same pod and such. And once it is done, we can use the agent, which is installed when the pod was spun up, and then we can run some tasks against it. So let me open this task, for example. So here we have this information. So here I'm creating a pod, and the pod definition is from this YAML definition file, which is stored in the script library of the universal controller, which contains information of the pod definition. And here I'm also trying to deploy the universal agent when I spin up the pod. And similar way, in this task here, I'm trying to monitor the pod which I'm spinning it up. So here I will make sure the pod is running before I run any tasks against this agent which is running within this pod. Yeah. So I can launch it. And as soon as I launch it, we can see the instances here. And if I go to the workflow monitor, now I can see. So the first thing was I checked whether a pod exists in the same name. If it doesn't exist, then I'm trying to create a pod. And then I'm trying to monitor whether the pod is running. And these three tasks got into success. Now I'm trying to list the agent, which was pinned up as a part of the pod. So now as soon as it made sure the agent is also up and running, I'm running some tasks against the agent, which is part of this pod. And then I'm trying to fetch the output and make sure everything runs as expected and such. Yeah. And now before I finish the end of the workflow, I'm also making sure the pod gets deleted because next time I don't have any uh, any clashes because of the pod name and such. Yeah. So next, going back to my presentation. So here, the next thing I would like to show is like how we can start a workflow from the middle. So this is a new feature available in our controller. So which I will demonstrate now.
Karthik, real quick,
Yep.
we had a request. Could you switch to light mode so it's a little bit better visibility? Also,
Okay.
could you show us how to do that while you're
Yes.
doing this? Thank
Yes,
you.
I can do it. So in order to switch between the user themes, you can go at the top where you can see your username, and then you have your option called preferences. And once it is switched, you have this option called user interface theme. Here you can set it to system default or light. In this case, it would be light. And as soon as I submit it, this interface change will happen. The theme change is automatically. Yeah. So yeah, now going back to the workflows, and here I would like to show everyone how we can launch a workflow from a particular point or set of tasks within the workflow rather than launching the entire workflow when there is a need for that. So for example, here we have the launch with variables. This is the classic thing where we will see the variables which are used within the workflow. But here we have a new option called vertex selection. So what you can do is once we enable this, it will bring up a table where you can select from which point you would like to launch that, from which point and within the workflow you want to run. For example, let's say that I want to run the workflow from the middle. In this case, this is the task which defines the middle of this workflow. And if I make this route, the workflow will execute starting from this point and all the objects which are all the tasks which are after that. So let me show you this, launching it. And if I go to the instances, you can see the number of task instances which are there. So the first launch of the workflow had 9 instances within the task. Now it has only 6 task instances within the workflow. So now we can see only from the vertex which I selected as a route is started executing, and the objects which are after that is in the status waiting. Yeah. And similarly, if you want to launch only the few parts within the workflow, we can also do it like this. So again, vertex selection. In this case, I will go and then I will select the tasks or the vertexes which I want to execute. For example, let's say that I want to execute the list agents and I want to add one more thing, maybe the Kubernetes pod deletion, for example. And this time, the workflow will execute only these 2 tasks within the workflow, and the rest will not be executed. So if I refresh it, here you can see only 2 tasks within the workflow is executing. And if I go to the workflow monitor, we can see only those 2 tasks. So similar way, you can define which tasks need to be executed as a part of your testing purposes, or you want to check only the subset of the workflow, you can do it. Yeah. So now I'm handing over the presentation to my colleague Huseyin, who has some interesting topics for today's agenda. To you, Huseyin.
Thank you, Karthik. Yes. Oop. Share my screen. And I hope the resolution is better now. And today I will talk about, mostly I will talk about the events. So the first thing I will talk is like a webhooks. This is something like a kind of a new feature. We have it like in 7.5, but in this release we started to use heavily. So let me show you. So in the controller, and like here, and under the administration, we have webhooks here. So these webhooks, if I click on new, these webhooks, the main idea is like, and we have some events in the system. So these events, like we call them like a global events. We can have like an event from an extension or some external systems, but also the controller itself creates some events. So these are like in global events, and these are internal. Like one example is like a agent events. Like whenever you have a new agent registered, unregistered, suspended, resumed, and or goes offline and go online. So all of them are events. So you can do based on this event, you can create an action. One example is like whenever there is a new agent registered to the controller, we can do something. And these are for the system properties. If someone changed the system properties, you can also have an event for it, and you can do some alert mechanism or notification, for example. And this last 2 is related with the task instances. So this one is whenever you launch something and whenever the status of the task instance change, and you will have an event for each of them. Like when you launch a task, you will have an event for like a defined status, started status, running status, success status, failed status, and everything. This one is for the SLAs. So like if you have something running, and let's say that you set up a late finish option for the task. So even the task is still running, this task can be late finish, and you can have a notification. So because it's not a status change, because the status is still running, but you can have an event for the SLA options. So today I will use the status change. So also in webhooks, we have 2 options. Like one option is the URL. So this one is like a regular webhooks. Like whenever something happened on the system, and we can send a REST request to an external system. So this is possible if you put if there's an authentication, you can put the authentication, you can put the URL, the parameters, and then it will send the payload to the target location. But there's another option. I think this one is more interesting. The other option is a launch task. So whenever a condition match, we can launch a task also. Because sometimes we can send a message to an external URL, but the payload is standard. So we have a static payload. We only send this information. If you want to change the payload, if you want to do something else, like in our case, we will do a ServiceNow incident. And in this case, you need to launch a task. So let me show you one example here. So we have this ServiceNow incident task. So I use the task status change event. I use the ServiceNow incident task for that one, and I put some conditions here. So these are like inside this event, we have all this information that's coming for each task status change. So we have the instance ID, we have the instance number, instance name, security name, description type, execution user, status value, and all of these information. So based on this information, I can put a filter here. So in my filter here is very simple here. I'm saying that if the task status is failed, I will do something. But also I added another option here. We have the attempt value. The attempt value is like whenever you launch something, the attempt value is 1. Whenever you rerun it, it becomes like 2, 3, or 4. And every rerun, it increases. So I put an option here to 1. So it means that I will only care about the first failure. So the other thing is, we can do a filter based on the business service. So we had this first 3 options in the previous versions, but in the latest version, we add this exclude options also. Now we can say that if it is not part of this business service, if it is not part of a business service, or if there's no business service assigned, or we can do that kind of thing, but I will use an include option here. I will say that if the task is inside a critical business service, and if the task fails in the first attempt, I will execute this ServiceNow task. So there is something interesting in here, I think you need to know. The variables. So a webhook will automatically set some variables, and it will pass the variables to the next task. So how it works? The syntax is like this. Every time it starts with the OPS trigger, then it gets the name of the, so let me keep this one here. And if I go to the definition of the event, so in here, you see there's a name. So the second part is the name of the event. And the last part is the name of the attribute. So you see here, security name. Security name is like this. So if you merge them all together, you will able to see the variables that passed from webhook to the task. So here I get the security name. I put the instance ID. By using the instance ID, I retrieve the output, and then I get the 100 lines of the output, and I will send it to the ServiceNow. So if you want to create a different ServiceNow incident, because the ServiceNow incident, maybe you will have a different assignment group or different urgency or that kind of information, and you can create multiple webhooks here, and based on the business service or based on some conditions, because we also have a critical here, and we have a critical information here. So if a task is critical inside the workflow and it fails, you can do some additional actions for them. And once you create the webhook, it is simple. It's very similar to triggers, but it's a little different than the triggers. Once you enable that one, it works. And so let me show you. There's a task that is a critical task, and then it will fail if I launch this one. And if I go to the activity window here, this is the failed task. Let me do 5 minutes. This is the failed task, and it automatically created the ServiceNow incident. And inside the ServiceNow incident, it's automatically put the name and the instance ID and everything. And if I go to details or for the variables, you will see all of these variables are passed. Like you see the ones with the OPS trigger and UAC task status change, all of these information passed from the webhook. So this is the first one. So the second one I will show is a simulation option. This is also something interesting, I guess. So simulation option is also, we had it in 7.5, I guess. And simulation option is like we have, and we add this simulation option to all of the tasks. So inside the task definition, and like we have a simulate option here. If you select this option and save this one, this task will always run with a simulate option. This is good, like during the conversion, for example. After we finish the conversion, if you want to test the workflows without running the actual task, you can use the simulate option. Simulate option will do something. It will calculate all the variables. It will calculate all the run and skip criteria, and it will try to do exactly everything. But it will not run the actual task. So it will not go to agent. It will not execute anything on the agent side. So the other option is, like, if you have a workflow and if you launch it with variables, also we have an option here to simulate it. So in this case, if you want to like a temporary simulate something, you can do that. So let's go to the workflow. So I have a workflow here. I have some tasks. So all the tasks inside the workflow will be simulated. So if I launch this one, and if I launch this workflow, because the simulate option is there, and if I go to this activity, so you see that they are executed, but you will see an asterisk or a star at the end of the status. So it means that it is simulated. It is not actually executed. You see here, for example, there was a run and skip criteria here, and based on this run and skip criteria, it also calculated this run and skip criteria, and it make the task a skip. So as I said, we are trying to do as much as possible. So simulation option also comes with a conditions. Like you can, sometimes you want to test something else. Like for example, here, I can say that I have this task has some email notifications and also have some set variable actions. So here I can say that I want to execute these options, or you may say that I don't want to execute them. So during the simulation, you can also test the actions. And also I have an option here to put an output. So I can say that I will simulate this task and then it will return this value. So this is also useful for testing the set variable options or parsing options for the output. So you can give your custom output here, and then the task will return with these values. Also, you will have an option to like make it fail. And I can say that I will fail it, and I will give an exit code 14. So if you have an action based on this one, in this case, because I have an email action, and for failures, it will execute. These publish options are related with the task monitor. So if you have a task monitor, I don't know if you know, but our task monitors work with events. So if you don't publish the status, like if you publish a status event, then if there's a task monitor looking for that condition, it will see it. If you don't publish it, they will not see it. So if you are not testing the task monitors, you don't need to publish the events. I think there was a question for the timers. It also works with the time. If you have a timer task, it will wait for it. And for any time-based and actions, it will try to resolve them. And like if you have a variable related with the output, it will also calculate them. So I changed this condition here to make it fail with the exit code 14. Let me save this one, and then I will launch the same workflow again. In this case, if I go here, you see it's running failed. So you see this task failed, and this task failed with the exit code 14. And if I go to the output, I have the output I set in the simulation mode. And there was an action for sending emails, and it sent the email, and I close my Outlook. But yeah, it will send the email. If there's an action like a late finish action also, it will also execute that one. But the only problem here is like, because these tasks complete immediately. So if you have a late finish option based on the duration, and it will not work. So if you have a late finish option based on the time, then it will work. And the other thing is there was a set variable action here. So I was getting the output and getting the name value from the JSON path. And it also execute that one because I said that execute the set variable action. So it set the name variable, and the next task is using, okay, it's not running now. So the next task is using the name variable here. And so it will execute that one. So this task, let me change it to success, and then we will see it. I will change it to success. And if I launch it again, and here, so this task, you see there was a name variable, but it also resolved the variable because and it could able to get the output, it could able to parse it, and we said that run the set actions, and it set the action and it executed. So this will be good for simulating the run and skip criteria. It will be good for checking if the variables will be resolved or not, and all kind of the other like time-based actions. I think this will be a good feature. So, and now we will talk about like a Teams and the Twilio integration, and for sending notifications. So let me close this. So, and for this use case, we will use the two integrations. One is the Teams integration. So I will use this Teams notification integration. So this integration has two features. One feature is for sending a notification, like a simple notifications, but also you can use this one for the approvals. Today, I will not talk about the approval because approval needs some additional information. And so I will just talk about a simple notification message to Teams. So the example will be whenever a task fails, we will send a message to a Teams channel. So the other one will be like a Twilio integration. So we have like a Twilio integration here. This Twilio integration is also used for sending for SMS messages. It can send a message to WhatsApp, and also it can send a voice messages. When it's a voice message, it will call the person. When you answer the call, it will read the voice message. So in this case, we will use the SMS option. So I will start with the Twilio. To make this Twilio integration SMS messages to work, you probably know that if you are using Twilio, and you need to have a campaign inside the Twilio, and you need to have you need to register your campaign to this system. So they need to know what are you sending, what type of messages are you sending. So that's why they want to be sure that you are not sending spam messages. So once you have this campaign approved, and once you have a number, and then you will get the account SID and the authentication token, and we will use them for sending the messages. So again, I use the webhooks because, as I said, webhooks are so useful. It's just a central place to execute something. So here I said that if there's if the status of the task is undeliverable or start failure or failed, and the attempt number is 1, then I will run a webhook to send I run a Twilio integration. So this Twilio integration is doing such thing, like we have an option here. I will say that send message. I will put the Twilio credentials. So I put the account ID and secret here. Secret will be in the password field. Then I need to put the sender. This is a number you get from the Twilio, and you will use a recipient. So it can be multiples. It can be just single person. So, but it should be in like a full format, like a plus, country code, and region code, and everything. Then you can have the message. Again, like I use some variables that coming from the webhook. And then I use a global variable, like a built-in variable system identifier. So this information is part of the SMS also. And so for that one, you can have a variable. For one customer, we implemented something like this. Maybe you can also use the similar approach. And I can give more information if you need. Like in ServiceNow, there is a on-call the functionality. So there is an API called Who's on Call, And by using this API, we could able to get all the on-call persons, and we can able to get the telephone number for them, and we set them to the variables. And by using these variables, we could, like, whenever a task fails, we send a message to the correct on-call person for today. So here I use a and variable here. So it has a message here. So if we test this, so I also put a business service for the task. So any task with this SMS notification business service fails, it will send a message. Here I have a task that will fail in this business service, and then it's invalid message. If I launch this task again, if I go to the activity, so this task failed and it executed a Twilio integration, and it sends me a message with this information, like the failed task name and on which environment. So you can have more options here, but this is just an SMS message. We implemented something for a customer also, make a call and then ask for some, like a press 1 to rerun, press 2 to the force finish, or that kind of IVR options. We also implemented such. So the other one is the Teams integration. Again, I created a notification for Teams. Same thing. If the task is a Teams notification task, it runs the task. So for Teams, you need to, like, this task is using a webhook, Teams, MS Teams webhook a feature. So I put in the resources, I put a link there. So this is the link from the Microsoft. And so you need to create an incoming webhook for the Teams channel. So here, it describes how to do it. Like, you need to go to the channel, you will say that manage channels, and then you will say edit, and then there's incoming webhooks. The icon is something like this. You will say add, and after you said add, there will be a form. You will give a name, and then you will say create. After you say the create, it will give you a URL. So this URL has all the authentication features also. So I put this URL here. Then I put the information, like if you are looking for an approval message, then it will send a message, like interactive message having a link on it. It says approve and reject links there. But for sending a simple SMS message, and we just use we just use the send message option here. We give the job name, status, and all of this information. Let's see it on action. And I have a task under this one. I will launch it. It will fail. And when it fails, it will send a Teams notification. And then if I open that one, so you see it send a Teams notification to a Teams channel here. And then it gives the name of the task here, or you can put some other information as part of this one. So every time, so in this one, I didn't use a temp. So if I rerun this task, it will do the same thing. It will send a message. You can put all the information that comes from the webhook. You can use them here. Okay, and the last one is UDMG and the interaction between UDMG and the controller. And so for that one, I'm not sure if all of you know or not, but we have a tool called UDMG. It is a Universal Data Mover Gateway. This is an MFT product for B2B file transfers. So in this system, like you can create your own servers. Like in here, I have some SFTP servers, I have HTTP servers, or I have a web client. So, and once I create this servers, then I create some rules. So these rules are like the permissions. Like I have a rule that's like called the claims that allows whenever they connect to SFTP server or the web client, they will see a folder called claims. And whenever this is a receive rule, so they can upload something, but they cannot download because I didn't give them a send rule. So they can upload something, but whenever they upload something, there is an action here, post task. So with the post task, we have an option to send an event to the controller. So this one, whenever you upload something, it will send an event to the controller, and the payload will have all the information about the file you upload there or your partner upload there. So one of the information will be which rule it match, which server it match, what is the user it uploaded, and then we have all of the information. What is the full path of the file? What is the name? What is the size? What is the time? And we have all of these information. And by using this rules INI, it knows which controller to connect and sends event there. So let's do an example here. So this is a web client. And so I will do the demo with the web client. So I log into the web client with my user to one of the web client servers. So I see a folder like a claims folder here. Then I will upload something. I will upload a claim. I will just select like 55, for example. I will upload a file here. So it's uploaded. You see, I upload it, but immediately you see it changed the name because a workflow executed in the background. So if I go to the activity window here, it started a workflow with the name of the file. So like this is just an example here. So we can run a virus scan. We can run a virus scan on the UDMG, but also we can do it here. And like we do a PGP encryption here. We can do encrypt or decrypt file. And we do an archive, and then like an example here, we are uploading to Azure Blob Storage and then running something inside the Azure, and then we are sending a message to Kafka so we can start the microservices for processing that claim, for example. So how this works? So how the system understands that there was a new file and what's the file and how it works. So for such thing, we use universal monitor triggers and universal monitors. So if I go here, like I have some triggers here. So one of them is like a claims trigger. So in this one, I'm using a monitor, universal monitor. In the monitor, I'm saying such thing. I'm saying that anything like this is a event also, but this is not this is not an event that is created by the user, so or by the controller. This is an event coming from an external system, which is UDMG. And we have some APIs for it, and you can use this API also if you want to send your events to the controller. You can also use the same functionality. So here we have an event. Inside the event, we have these fields there. So these are like the what's the actual rule, what is the file name, what is the server they uploaded, or that kind of information. So in this case, I did very simple here. I'm just checking the rule. If there is something uploaded matching with that rule, I will do something. If the rule match, then I will launch this and web workflow. So again, it's the same thing. When I launch this workflow will have all of these information. Like it will get this information. Like the variables will start with this OPS trigger, and this part is the name of the event definition, and then these are the fields. So I can able to get the name of the file. I can get the full path. I can get the server they uploaded. What is the user? What is the rule match? And what is the size and the transfer number, or that kind of. We have all of this information. Like this is the full path of the file. And by using these variables, I can like encrypt the file, decrypt the file, or do some additional things. That's all for today. And then I will pass back to Bob for some mainframe features.
Thanks, Huseyin. Great job. Looks great. Let me just share my screen here, and we will be ready in a second. Okay. All right. So thanks everybody for everybody's time today. What I'm going to go through is 4 or 5 different features of our the ZOS jobs. Many of you who are customers know that we've been putting a lot of enhancements, a lot of work into our ZOS agent, and it's pretty robust now, right? And we still have there's a feature that is going to be coming out in the next release that will give you even more flexibility as far as monitoring jobs that are run outside the controller on the mainframe. So I think customers have been asking for that, and it's slated for the next release. Okay, so one of the features that we put in is into the version 7.5, version 7.6 of the agent and the universal controller is the edit JCL features. And for those of you who know that, it gives you the flexibility of not having to log on to the mainframe in order to make a JCL change, put a restart card on a JCL. It allows you to do everything from the single pane of glass, which is the controller, right? So if I go into the controller, oops, 1 second. Right here, right? You could see that in the mainframe task, we know during setup you get all the same features that you get as you do in your Linux, Windows, your any cloud application, all the same flexibility with variables, triggers, jobs that can't run together, etc. Right? But the main feature that I want to go into, because it really was driven by customer request, is being able to edit the JCL, right? So if I go ahead and click on the pencil here, right, it says, oh, I want to go look at this JCL location. You have to give it a mainframe credential here, right? That just like what you're used to today, the mainframe credentials, every credential is encrypted, right? So he goes out, and if you're using top secret RACF ACF2, you'll see that you'll be able to go in here. If I did not have the proper access to look into these jobs on the mainframe, then the request would be denied. You wouldn't get this far. One of the things I want to point out in this job is we're actually passing date and time variables to the JCL. We know that happens a lot with customers who want to embed date and time variables into their data set names, sysin data, or whatever the case may be. And I'll show you what that looks like once I run it. So if I click save, there's really nothing that I saved. Okay. A couple more features that we added is the override library, right? So in this example here, it's saying if I find SB job 1A in the override library, I want to run it from that library first, right? And then you have the capabilities of saying, I want to delete the override after I use it. And then I want to, you have the ability to say, maybe I want to run it 14 days before I let the deletion happen, right? So, typically what I find is customers will say, I'm setting up an override for tonight. I want the job to run from the override library. Once it runs from there, we can clean it up, right? And the thing that is nice about this is we added a new feature in the last release, right? Which is gives you the capabilities of writing all your jobs to a library. And so you can see here, I have a library called copyjcl.new. Anytime I run a job, he's going to make a copy of it. So if I look for this job in here, right, you can see the one that I'm showing you. You can see this was submitted this morning. It tells you which job it was. It tells you which JCL library it was run from. It also gives you the execution ID of that job. And as most of you know, with our mainframe, we include the rerun restart capabilities, right? It's built right into the agent. There's no other software that you have to install to make that happen. Okay. So if I get out of here and go back here, you'll see that in my example here, I have the regular JCL library. If I look in my JCL library, there's nothing in there. And I'm going to give you an example of that in just a minute. Okay. So if I go back to the controller, there's just a few other things that we'll cover on here. Is you can override the job name, you can override the job class, the message class, or if you wanted to use some of your sysadmin statements to, maybe route this job to another LPAR, right? And you have to make sure that your environment is set up for that, right? You typically, if you're routing it to another LPAR, besides the agent that you're running it on, you're going to need to, have Sysplex set up, and we do have full support of Sysplex, right? We have Sysplex failover, and everything can be dynamic with your Sysplex. But let's go ahead and run this anyway. So I'm going to go ahead and launch it, right? And if I go to my instances tab, you can see that this job already ran, right? So, without having to go to the mainframe, I can get the output at my fingertips, right? You can see that all my steps ran. Here's my variables that got resolved, the month, day, year, the month, and the year. With Stonebranch, with our agents, you have your availability to every Java date function that's out there, right? And we have great samples of those. If I open up the instance itself, you'll see that if I go down, you'll see where I had the variables, you now see them resolved, right? And if I go back to the mainframe and I go back to my copy JCL and I look at SB job, right? You'll see this one now is the one that I just ran at Eastern time, 10:45. And if I look down here, you'll see that my variables are all resolved in my output as well. Okay. All right. So let me go back to the controller here. Go to my next topic. Right. I talked about the JCL save library. The good thing with that is, why don't I give you an example where this might come into play? So let's say I want to run this from override, right? So, I'm in a situation where the job failed. I can cut this, right? And then I can go back to my override library and I could put this member in here, SB job 1A, right? You can see here, I can reset it. I can paste, right? And then maybe I'll make a change to this, right? Maybe I'll add one more step down here. This is what I want my override to be tonight. So now if I save this, right, you can see, and if I go back to the controller, right, you'll see that if I come down here to the override and I put in my credential, you have to put a credential in, and I view it, you're going to see that here's my override, here's my step that I added. So now if I go ahead and launch this, right, he should run, right? You can see that he ran okay. If I go and look at the output, you'll see that I've got all my output. You can see that I added step 6, right? But if I go back to the mainframe and I edit it, this Dave said he already deleted it from this library because it was a one-time temporary override. Okay. All right. So let's continue down in the sake of time. Okay, UAG serve, right? I feel that this is, a pretty important piece. And, I didn't really realize till recently the type of information that was kept in there, right? So, if I go back to the mainframe and I go into SDSF, right? And I do and go into our SDSF, you can see that on our system we have, we have 3 agents installed on the same LPAR, right? So the one that we use for this controller that I'm on is UBR USA 1, right? But the UAG serve gives you a lot of nice, valuable information, right? It tells you if you have all your exits in place correctly, right? If you had a rogue one out here, you would see that it would be pointing to the load point of 0000, and and maybe something was wrong when you defined it. But typically, if your exits are not set correctly, then your jobs won't be tracked correctly. They'll be submitted. They'll kind of get lost in space, right? If I go down here, it tells you, let me just come down to here, and it tells me, part of the clusters that he's joined, the agent IP address. Do we have automatic failover set to never on this for Sysplex? You can see we're pointing to a structure name called sbi.uag.q. You can see here, if we're redirecting our output to a different class, you would see all that information in here. Probably one of the most important data sets that's used is this UNV JSC, right? It's it's defined. It's a shared file amongst your agents in the Plex. It tells you which load library you're running from. It just gives you a lot of information. Your spool file for the USS files that are needed, and then your configuration, right? And most of you know that there's 2 main members that you edit when you're doing your mainframe configurations, right? So if I go here and I go into UBR USA 1, right? And I go down to my configuration right here, right? So all this information that's in the UAG serve will come from these 2 members right here, right? And then he'll populate. And if you went inside and, the main member, which whether it's mainframe or distributed, it would be here. And you could see how we have, our structure name and, what OMS server we're connecting to, etc. Okay. All right. So I think we're at Q&A. Thank you.
Yeah.
That was great. Thank you, everyone. Okay, so we will, sorry. I did ask where everyone was joining from. So we had lots of answers. We have Greece, Warsaw, Texas, Oklahoma, Michigan, Minnesota, India, some more Texas, Norway, Germany, Netherlands, Greece, Ireland. Wow, from all over the world. That's really great. Okay, so there's a couple questions. All right, let's see this first one. Can't read it. XML or XLS files. It has all kinds of integration. So I suppose, yes, I wanted to make sure.
Yeah, I can take this one. Yeah, we can read the XML. So some integrations like Dataflix or that kind of, they can simply do that such thing. But our agent comes with Python. So with the Python, we can read them. We can read the XML files, we can parse them, and we can use the values coming from the XLS files.
Okay, great. Next one. Can you add a button to Teams notification to rerun a failed task?
And I can take this one again. So this approval process is for such things, like approval process will put there's a interactive messages or something, like Teams allows you to put links or buttons at the end of the messages. And with approval, we currently have like approve and reject, but it's also possible to use the same approach, like the webhooks, to send a message to Teams to have a option to like a rerun or the other options. We are working, like currently this integration needs an additional process like Lambda, for example. When you do an approve process, it sends a message to Lambda, Lambda comes to the controller. So we are working on something without Lambda or something by using this features with the event features of the controller. And we are working on to make it simpler. So after that, I think you can put any options to the Teams messages.
Great. All right. Is it possible to get an email notification when a task is running for a long time, a long running task?
I can take this one again. So we have this late finish option. So late finish option can be based on time, it can be based on duration, or it can be based on the average duration. You can say that if the task is running more than 2 hours, you can mark this task as a late finish task, and you can execute some actions. One actions can be like sending a notification or launching any other task. Like for one customer, we are just calling the support person and saying that this task is running late. If you approve and click on press 1, or you can abort the task. Like if you can put an option saying that if the task is running more than 24 hours, just abort the task, for example. We have that options.
Okay. Next one, can we use this simulate option for a timer task, a time-based task?
Yes. If you have a timer task that waits for it, and it will wait for it. And if you have a time-based actions, variables, or conditions, it will also calculate them.
Great. All right. Is there a better way to handle and/or conditions in workflows? When we have a workflow, success of a job or success of B and success of C, at the moment we use variable monitors to handle this, but we feel it is more overhead.
I can take this one.
Take this one, Huseyin, if you want.
Yeah.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
That's something I just implemented. Like we have an integration called conditions now. We didn't publish it yet, but it has the same options. Like you can put in the text format. You can put I want to get this task to be succeeded, or this task to be succeeded, or the exit code of this task should be greater than 7 or equals to 7 or something. And then also you can put an option with the variables. You can use parentheses to make a very complex and or conditions. This is something we implemented for integration. But in the next release, I believe we will have more options for the connections. Because currently our dependency now is if you have 2 tasks connecting to 1 task, it means that both of them should be successfully completed, and then we can run the other one. With the new release, I think we will have an option like a complex conditions, this one or that one. You can put an or conditions and conditions on, you can combine them together. So both of them will be available. But for now, I have this integration. If you want, I can share it to you.
Great. And I just added into the resource, the handout section, a link to the integration hub. So you can download the integrations that we covered today, and keep an eye out for the new integrations that Huseyin just spoke about. All right, next question. Can you manually set a failed task instance to restart after a certain time?
We have actions. We can do it immediately. But also it is possible, if you put late finish duration. Like if you say that I will mark this task as a late finish, and if the task is not completed and if the status is failed, then I want to rerun the task, for example. You can have that kind of thing. Yeah,
you can
other ways. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, you can also, put a web service task or something in there to runs only on a failure, and then set that to do the restart for you.
Yes. Same thing with webhook also. Like if you put a webhook for the same task for the failure, after you receive that notification, you can start a workflow. Like the first task can be like wait for some times and then restart this task, because you will have the task instance ID. By using that ID, you can restart anything.
Perfect. All right, that is all the questions we have. Thank you, Bob, Huseyin, and Karthik, for the useful tips and tricks. Don't forget to register for our next webinar on June 19th. It will be Unlocking Observability, your guide to getting started. In this webinar, you'll learn how to set up and use the latest observability tools to collect and analyze data across your entire hybrid IT environment. Also, check your email later today, and we will send you a recording from this session for you to rewatch or share. Thank you, everyone that submitted questions. If we didn't get to your questions, we will follow up with you later today. Thank you so much for attending, and we hope you have a great day.